Has Sony finally done it? I can't believe my eyes. These photos look pretty good even without doing a ton of adjustments in the camera app, but more on that later. It's that time of the year again where Sony comes out with their new flagship phone, one that is designed as a mini professional camera with hundreds of adjustable settings. Every year we praise the quality of the hardware, but criticize the reality of Sony refusing to adapt their phone camera to more casual users. Let's see what they've come up with this year and if the Xperia 1 Mark V can compare against the iPhone 14 Pro or the Galaxy S23 Ultra. Thanks to Ugreen for sponsoring this video. Let the facts speak. Starting off with the main camera, you might have immediately realized the warm white balance of the Xperia, but the quality is still there. Compared to past results of their auto mode, this is pretty good as it even has more detail in the background than the other two. Regardless, the iPhone and the Galaxy are slightly ahead here. The next image is a test of dynamic range, though I'll admit that I didn't do it on purpose. It's a hard choice because while Samsung software is often one of the best for these types of shots, the foreground is a bit dark. Sony did a better job than Apple here, not just in terms of dynamic range, but also with regard to the general outlook. The photo is soft compared to the sharp textures of the iPhone, so no surprise that photographers often praise Sony with what they're trying to do in their smartphone cameras. This is purely my opinion, but I feel the great quality of the foreground of the 1 Mark V as well as the soft and natural textures balances out the better HDR of the Galaxy. The iPhone though dropped the ball by blowing out the sky. Lastly, our classic motorcycle/scooter shots. Gonna have to go for the photos on the sides for this one, as the white balance is once again slightly too warm for my taste in the middle, which is visible when you focus on the green tone of the scooter. Indoors is another story though, as I found out that the newest Xperia flagship is still inconsistent in auto mode. You'll need to play around with shutter speed, ISO, and exposure to get consistent results. This photo is overall fine though, with different interpretations of the phones. One detail that's funny to me is just how much color science varies between brands, which is especially visible when there are bright colors in the frame. In this case, it's my shorts. Next photo though doesn't bode too well for the Xperia. This was the inconsistency that I was talking about, as the other two are often consistent in situations like this due to the emphasis that these two brands have been putting on software for many years. Our last indoor shot is one where we really appreciated the shallow depth of field in all photos, even though none of them are housing the largest sensor present in the market. Just would have preferred the iPhone's white balance to be a tad more neutral, as the original scene is more close to the one on the right. As we were in a rush, we snapped some really, and I mean really low light shots in our studio for the last section. As it is with most phones, a lack of light indicates that either the photo will be dark but more natural, or the opposite like on the iPhone. It's pretty much based on preference, but the photos on the left and the right look better, while the Xperia being extra warm and slightly blurry. The same can be seen in the next image, as iPhone's noise reduction and brightness adjustments are kicking in. Even though it overall looks better, we need to remember that the scene in real life looked like how the Galaxy portrayed it, which is something that you also should take into consideration when reviewing night photos. Interestingly enough, close-up shots in the dark did cause the iPhone's sharpness to kick in perhaps a bit too much. I really like the soft and natural details of the Xperia here, as the Galaxy is also looking decent. Is this the result of Samsung dumping some huge camera updates on their flagships over the last few months? We'll leave that up to you, so let us know your thoughts as well as hitting those like and subscribe buttons. As for Sony, really well done. I love the softer textures as well as the improved software compared for adjusting photos. What I also love is that when we had battery issues while shooting footage because it was a long day, we were able to charge the phones with the Ugreen Nexode 140-watt charger to great success thanks to its hyper-fast charging. This works even with power-intensive devices like MacBooks, as a single port pumps 140 watts to a MacBook Pro, charging it to 56% in 30 minutes. It does need to be used with a USB-C to MagSafe 3 charging cable, which is not included, but it's well worth the performance. It has 3-in-1 multi-port charging, which means that 2 USB-C ports and 1 USB-A port powered 2 14-inch laptops and a phone simultaneously, fast enough for a multi-device tech user. It's compatible with many devices ranging from the smallest to the largest laptops, tablets, smartphones, as well as handheld gaming devices like the Nintendo Switch, and the power dispenser system ensures long-term longevity and safety by adjusting power outputs, which in turn protects the battery of the device and improves its life. Their thermal guard system scans the temperature 800 times per second, safeguarding your device from overheating while charging. Lastly, what really impressed me was the smaller size of the charger, which is almost a quarter smaller than other 140-watt chargers. If you were thinking about a product like this for your daily needs, then check the link in the description to get the Ugreen Prime Day deals, where you can find their products for up to 40% off. After we charged the phones, we went back to business with the ultra-wide camera. We continued to see a good performance from the Xperia flagship. The other two are also looking good so far, with no problems regarding color accuracy, detail, or white balance. In the next photo, while I enjoyed the detail and clarity of the iPhone's photo, I once again liked the aggressive shadows that had not been touched too much by the Xperia. The Galaxy has less detail than the other two if you look at the wall to my right as well as my face. Indoors, they continue to perform pretty well. You can see the slightly less aggressive colors on the Xperia, which is pretty much based on their interpretations of photos. It's not good or bad, just different, and I kinda like it. No noticeable problems in the next image either, just slight differences in brightness. HDR also looks good enough, just find it interesting how the iPhone's clouds look way different, but that's once again preference. At night or low light, ultra-wide as usual is a problem. Smaller sensors, lesser technology equals photos like these. No matter how much the iPhone looks artificial, it has the only usable photo. Slightly more light does make me lean towards the Xperia though, as it preserves the ambiance better than the others. Not bad Sony, not bad at all. Still though, portrait mode has historically been lackluster on Sony's side, and I'm not too convinced that this will change. I might be wrong though, as I've read that Sony has gotten rid of their TOF sensor and instead are using AI to determine distance, possibly improving edge detection. Well, what can I say, the first photo has good blur as well as good enough edges. Still, I wouldn't say that any of them are flawless on this one. Switching me with a lion statue was a good idea though it seems, as I'm really liking this photo. Sony's depth estimation has definitely improved, which is something I never really expected from them. As for the last outdoor shot, it surprises me to see some slight errors on the left side of my face on Apple's side, as in our previous comparisons, Sony was no match for Apple when it came to photography software and mobile phones. Indoors is where we realize Samsung is making a quiet and deep run by keeping up the good performance, but what in the world is that around my arm on the Xperia? It looks like a scissor was used to cut me out and paste me onto another background. Jokes aside, I was wondering when something like this would happen, because there is no way that they could have suddenly made everything perfect compared to last year. At least the next photo is fine, continuing the trend of what usually happens in this comparison, which is us appreciating the quality of these devices. Lastly, a shot from the side. I've seen plenty of phones mess up this shot, especially the edges around the hair, nose, and chin, but all three of them did really well here, which made me happy. Really solid performance here from these phones as well. Naturally, the Xperia is a much newer phone than the other two, but it's nice to remember just how far Sony usually lags behind in smartphones, because they just don't care that much compared to the big brands that have everything on the line. As for videos, I am just shocked. This is some DSLR quality stuff coming out of the One Mark V, and as I mentioned, we're using regular settings without getting into the details of the Cinema or Video Pro apps. It's a soft approach compared to the sharp ones on the other two, though the iPhone is still doing a very good job as usual, while the Galaxy is decent, but not on the same level as the others by being a bit too bright. Ultra-wide is not that different, as the Xperia manages to portray my facial features as well as my skin tone very well. In fact, better than the other two. I'm just very impressed with Sony and what they've done with their camera software, except the HDR. This is because when we move indoors, we see the one thing that they sort of missed the mark on. The device is unable to control the sunlight from time to time, and while I look really good, the room in general does not, but I have faith that they'll be able to tweak this a little so that the phone can understand the scene more accurately. Ultra-wide indoors is pretty solid across the board, and as I said, when you stay away from situations which require advanced HDR software, the Xperia One Mark V is definitely able to give you what you're searching for. In low light or night conditions, the iPhone is still the best, as it has almost always been, as their video algorithm is pretty much at the top of the list. The same goes for ultra-wide, as the order will not change with Sony not being able to match up to the quality of the Samsung flagship, as the iPhone takes it once again. When we look at 8K though, or rather not look at it, the iPhone doesn't have it, and no idea if they think it's a necessary feature, but we will see in their upcoming flagship in a few months. Until then, I should mention that the Xperia flagship also doesn't have this mode, which is going to be leaving us with one last phone to look at here in the form of the S23 Ultra. This phone has an 8K mode, a pretty good one I must admit, both in terms of quality and stabilization, giving it some extra points here in the video category. As for zoom, Sony brings something really cool to the table. Here are the optical zooms of these phones, but it's important to mention that the Xperia 1 Mark V has a continuous zoom ranging from 3.5 to 5.6 times. It doesn't make an amazing difference, but in my opinion, it is still a very cool feature. Samsung is once again leading the race as it can be seen at 10 times, with the iPhone also looking better than the Xperia. 20 times is going to be solidifying this, with 30 times not giving us much room to discuss other matters, besides the fact that it's rare for a new generation phone to have worse zoom than the iPhone. With stabilization next in line, we weren't surprised to see that Sony didn't include ultra stabilization modes like commonly seen in Android phones, because it's not something that they do. It's good enough for little movement and shooting in 4K, but the other two are just a bit more stable, with the iPhone 14 Pro surpassing the Galaxy S23 Ultra as it usually does when the highest mode of stabilization is turned on. Granted, you're not going to be running around with a phone like this most of the time, but we like to push the limits. With the front camera in mind though, it's safe to say that Sony is a similar company to Xiaomi. Great hardware as always, except the front camera. As usual, the Galaxy's front camera is what impresses me, with very nice textures, colors, and skin tone in both the indoor and outdoor photos we took. During the front camera video though, I did notice the Xperia's front camera doing what Xiaomi flagships often do, and that's failure to produce a video that's usable. This is mostly because of the software not being up to par, as you can see the difference when you look at the other two. The iPhone's video is my preference as usual, with the Galaxy coming in at a close second. What is up guys, we're back with another audio test for our new camera comparison, featuring a brand new phone as usual, but we're going to be starting off with the iPhone 14 Pro. We are waiting for the 15 series to come out so we can review that for you too. In the middle is the phone that I just talked about, the Sony Xperia 1 Mark V. Now, Sony phones historically have never had the best front cameras. This one doesn't look too amazing either, but in this one, we're going to be checking out the audio first. And we have the Samsung Galaxy S23 Ultra. We're also waiting for the S24 series, but those are gonna come out a little later than the iPhone, so keep your eyes open for that. The Galaxy is known for noise cancelling, while the iPhone is known for crisper audio. Usually the S23 Ultra manages the audio quality much better, but this time, not really pleased with the quality, and this is due to the inconsistency of the microphone. The Xperia is decent, but not as good as the iPhone, and this could also be said for slow motion. 4K slow-mo is pretty much unseen in mainstream phones except for Sony flagships, but is 120 FPS really enough? I don't think the lower frames justify the increase in resolution, but that's just my opinion, as the Galaxy can do 960 frames, which is pretty cool, so they will take this category, while the Xperia is tied with the iPhone, which brings us to macro. The 1 Mark V doesn't have a macro mode, and I don't think it matters that much because the macro mode in their previous flagships was pretty useless. Their zoom doesn't work like other phones either, as in you can't use it to replicate a macro mode, so these are the results that we got. Well then, looking at the final results, and regardless of what happened, I want to express my thanks to Sony for finally upping the effort they put into optimizing their software. The video capabilities of their new phone looks amazing if we ignore shooting at night, and the improvements in photos are very visible. Photos were won by the Galaxy thanks to Samsung's huge software updates, and the Ultrawide was a tie between the iPhone and the Xperia. Portrait was very close, but Samsung ended up taking it, with videos being a tie between the iPhone and the Galaxy, but it's to be remembered that iPhone is still the king of 4K video. Zoom was obviously won by Samsung, stabilization went to Apple, the front camera went back to Samsung, as the audio went back to Apple, slow motion once again went back to Samsung, as macro was a tie between the two. We would appreciate it if you could subscribe to the channel and leave a like on the video if you enjoy tech reviews and comparisons, so we can see you in the next video. Take care, until next time.